I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today, where I am, and for those who are joining us, I'm joining the meeting from the lands of the Wurundjeri people, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. So as I said, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Naomi Riley. I am Strategic Lead for Midwifery at the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Federation, working in the Federal Office. I'm a midwife and nurse and represent the interests of ANMF midwives and nurses on national policy and regulation. Please familiarise yourself with the question and answer function to post questions. There's an option there to uptick a question. So if it's particularly relevant to you, if you can do that, that would be great. Then we know which questions to prioritise if there are a few at the end of the session. Through the information discussed today, we hope to develop a shared understanding and clarity of the PII changes for privately practising midwives, particularly in relation to intrapartum care and the consideration of practical steps you may need to take to adopt these changes. I'd like to start by introducing our panellists that have joined us today and thank them for sharing their knowledge of the current PII landscape. We've got Joel Chichia, Policy and Advocacy Manager at MIGA, Pedro Francisco, the acting Director of Medical Indemnity and Medicare Eligibility Section of the Department of Health, Disability and Ageing. And we've got Siobhan O'Loughlin, she's the Policy Manager at Midwifery at AHPRA. The work Siobhan leads supports the NMEA to deliver on their strategic priorities as relevant to midwifery. She is a midwife with experience working in tertiary centres, MGP home birth models, insurance and regulation. With the recent changes in professional indemnity insurance, or PII, over the recent months, the landscape for privately practising midwives is changing, and we hope to talk about best practice in regards to PII and also chat about the practical aspects of meeting the safety and quality guidelines for PMs working in community practice. So we'll cover off the recent changes in the PII landscape and how to apply the safety and quality guidelines for privately practising midwives in the context of the new changes. And then we're going to finish up with questions at the end. So to kick us off, Pedro, can you tell us a bit about the changes to PII for midwives earlier this year?
Thanks, Naomi. Yes, so this is a significant development for the profession. From 1 July this year, the Commonwealth expanded the Midwife Professional Indemnity Scheme. The expansion provides 100% Commonwealth subsidy for the cost of claims arising from out-of-hospital intrapartum care, which also includes home births. This initiative rectifies a long-standing and critical issue. Previously, midwives attending home births and the mothers in their care were operating without adequate insurance. This expansion now provides that necessary security and professional protection. The overarching aim of the Midwife Professional Indemnity Scheme has always been to help lower insurance premiums and support greater choice and access to maternity services. This change directly supports that goal by making home births a properly insured option for endorsed midwives.
Thanks, Pedro. I think the inclusion of intrapartum care in the PII product under the NPIS is a really exciting advancement for midwives and women and gender diverse people seeking private midwifery care. Can you just give us a little bit more information about what the purpose of professional indemnity insurance is, please?
Sure, I can certainly answer the question at a high level, and Joel might have more to add. But at its core, professional indemnity insurance, or PII, serves two critical purposes. Firstly, it protects the practitioner, in this case, the midwife, from significant financial costs that can be associated with malpractice or negligence claims. And just as importantly, it also protects the public. It ensures that women accessing a midwife's services have a source of funds to compensate them if they suffer harm or financial loss due to a negligence claim. And then now that there's a comprehensive product available for home births, there's an expectation that every eligible midwife, so every endorsed midwife, obtains it if they intend to provide that services. This isn't just like an optional extra, it's a fundamental part of professional practice that protects both the midwife and their patients. We also know that people accessing private midwifery care find it very reassuring to know that their midwife is backed by a proper insurance product.
Great, thanks, Pedro. Joel, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a couple of things. Just want to say that we really wholeheartedly welcome the government's decision to broaden the scheme to include out-of-hospital births. The thing with insurance is you need big pools of people to be paying into an insurance pool to be able to make it effective. And unfortunately, the Australian market just was never ever going to be big enough without the government support to be able to make it a viable option from a public provider. So therefore, yeah, the government intervention in this instance was absolutely crucial by being able to make this available. So thank you to the Commonwealth for making that decision. As far as the other things you should be aware of under indemnity insurances, we'll support you in matters that might be of employment matters as well through MEGA, through your insurance with us. We'll take you through issues where even if you're not privately practicing, but actually, no, I'm not going to go into that. That's more of a medical issue. But in other areas, we can you can have different policies with us as well. But midwifery is limited. My apologies for going there. But we will support you in matters that may arise if you are employed, outside. So if you are privately practicing midwife, but employed by a larger midwifery group to provide those services, we'll help you with employment matters as well. When your issues may diverge from your employer, because sometimes there could be differences there, we'll support you through that. We'll also support you through any other disciplinary matters. So it might be a matter with the Nursing Midwifery Board. We'll support you through that with legal expertise that goes along with responding to any matters that may arise. And yeah, they're the major things. That's in addition to any claims that you might have raised against you with regards to your specific practice.
Thanks, Joel. Joel, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about the PII offered through MEGA on the back of the intrapartum changes? Sure.
So apart from the inclusion of out-of-hospital intrapartum care being indemnified as part of the policy, everything largely stays the same. We have changed the wording. So option A used to be, I can't remember what it was called, but now it's called full scope of midwifery practice. That just goes to reflect that everything that's within the scope of a midwife is covered under the policy. And our option B insurance is for those midwives who aren't providing intrapartum care services and just want to be covered for the other range of services that are provided by privately practicing midwives. The changes with the intrapartum care are automatic. So if you have an option A policy that cover you for intrapartum care, you are automatically covered for out-of-hospital births, should you want to provide that care. If you didn't have a policy previously that covered you for intrapartum care and you're going to provide out-of-hospital intrapartum care, we'd strongly advise you to have that cover for the reasons that Pedro mentioned earlier. Not only is it going to cover you in the course of a claim, but also provides that level of security if something was to go wrong for those women that you are supporting through their home birth experience. If anything is to go wrong, they're going to be able to get access to compensation to put things as best as they can and support them through that process should the unthinkable arise.
Thanks, Joel. Are there types of practice that in your experience have resulted in sort of a grey insurance coverage?
Look, over the last few years, where there has been no indemnity cover for intrapartum care, we have seen issues arise where it may well have been a planned out-of-hospital birth. However, midwives have called us up to try to get it included as part, essentially telling us what we would like to hear to be able to cover them as part of their overall insurance, because there is an emergency provision. So even if you have option B coverage, if something was to happen in an emergency situation, you would have some coverage for an out of hospital birth. We have played, because our policy was quite prescriptive previously, because of the requirements we had with the Commonwealth and what things were actually there to cover. It has engendered some distrust amongst some midwives, with thinking that we're trying to deny claims, but really we have our hands quite tied as to what actually comes in as a qualifying claim that's going to allow access to the midwifery professional insurance scheme as funded by the Commonwealth. If it doesn't sit within that, then unfortunately there's not a lot we can do. What we're hoping, or what we envisage with the change in the policy from the Commonwealth's point of view, a lot of the exemptions and write-backs and things that were existing in the previous policy have now disappeared, because there is a much broader coverage, which we're hoping will actually help build a lot more trust in us, and we're hoping that midwives do trust us for their insurance, and that they do feel secure and safe in being able to provide the services that they provide to women every single day. And that's what we're hoping. That's a better area we're trying to get to, rather than everybody thinking that the insurance company is out to reduce a claim, and the insurance company in the back of their mind thinking everyone's trying to take advantage of them, which we know is not true, but we just want to make sure that we can start to build that trust.
Great, thanks, Joel. Pedro, back to you. Can you give us an update about the extension of the exemption for midwives providing intrapartum care?
Yeah, of course. So this is a key part of the transition. The PII exemption under the national law has been extended until 31st of December 2026. It's really important to understand this is just a transitional measure. Its specific purpose is to provide a reasonable time frame for all midwives who wish to attend home births to meet the necessary requirements for practice. This includes gaining endorsement and, of course, securing the appropriate insurance that is now available under the expanded midwife professional indemnity scheme. We recognise that this transition creates challenges, particularly around the pathway for registered midwives to get the experience they need to become endorsed. We've provided some advice and are engaging with APRA on this issue to ensure there's a clear and safe pathway for the future midwifery workforce. But yes, the hard 31st December 2026 exemption remains.
Great, thank you, Pedro, for being so clear with that. We're going to move on to you, Siobhan, and have a bit of a chat about how to meet the safety and quality guidelines for privately practicing midwives in view of these changes. Siobhan, are you able to provide some guidance on the implications for midwives working in private practice regarding the changes to PII and the exemption as far as our regulatory responsibilities go?
Definitely. Thanks, Naomi. They're really important questions, and I would probably just start by saying the safety and quality guidelines are a really important regulatory document that apply to all PPMs. So they don't just apply to PPMs who offer antenatal, postnatal and birthing at-home care. So I think there's a bit of a misnomer out there that only if you're practicing within home birth or home birth context or delivering antenatal, postnatal care do you need to be thinking about the safety and quality guidelines and the requirements that sit embedded within them. If you work privately as a midwife, so that might be you have a popular Instagram page where you're providing advice about midwifery care, you are practicing your profession, and if you are practicing your profession, you must hold professional indemnity insurance. So the requirement to hold indemnity insurance isn't embedded into the safety and quality guidelines. It actually sits, it's so important that it sits in a separate and discrete registration standard. And I'm sure everyone's familiar with that, but that's the professional indemnity insurance arrangements registration standard. And the same thing is embedded within the national law. So it's a legal and regulatory requirement that you have PII for all aspects of your practice. As Pedro's outlined, there has been an exclusion from holding that PII if you are a midwife during the period of offering intrapartum care at home. And historically, that's been because there has been no product on the market. So the national law and the regulatory documents did account for that, and the exemption was written in. But it's not a blanket exemption. You can't just have it. The requirement is, or the proviso is, that you have to comply with the safety and quality guidelines, and only midwives who comply with the 7 requirements are able to rely on that exemption. And so every year when you renew your registration with the board and also your endorsement, you make a commitment to say that you comply. So
Siobhan, may I just step in there to make another point about the exemption? It doesn't actually prevent you from having a claim made against you by a woman that you're caring for. So it's not going to protect you in a negligence claim. It merely means that the board and APRA aren't going to take action against you for not having the insurance to cover your full scope of practice, as is the case in every other regulated health profession.
That's correct. So the changes that will come in on the 31st of December next year, what that will mean is that midwives it'll bring midwives it'll bring the expectations for midwives into line with every other regulated health profession within the national scheme, which is that you must have PII for all aspects of your practice. So I think the question, Naomi, was just to think a little bit about the safety and quality guidelines and what that means within the context of the changes. So the 7 requirements that are in there are not changing. Those requirements, and I think everyone is probably very familiar with what those look like. There's a requirement around informed consent, about open disclosure. There's requirements in there about referral pathways. So those are not shifting. And the board is currently undertaking quite a big review of those guidelines just to make sure that they are in line with the changes in the insurance landscape. What will look different as part of that review is the information in there that does relate to professional indemnity insurance, because we need to have the most current information available in there for you so that you can be appropriately informed of what is required by a privately practicing midwife. So I would encourage all midwives here to look out for the consultation documents, which are going to come out later this week. There'll be an opportunity for you to have your say around the changes that the board is proposing to make to these guidelines. They are very minimal. There is no shifts in what is required or what is expected for the privately practicing midwife year on year. They will continue to look the same. So I think that probably sums it up.
Thanks, Siobhan. One question that I had in relation to that is the informed consent that the midwife needs to provide. One thing that's been brought to my attention is that with the primary midwife having intrapartum insurance, they may no longer include in their informed consent a statement saying that they don't have PII for the practice that they're providing. However, their second midwife may not be endorsed and may not have that intrapartum PII. Could you provide some more information about, I guess, second practitioners and ensuring that they meet that requirement?
Yeah, sure. So midwives who practice as the second practitioner, they are a privately practicing midwife when they're offering those services as part of a home birth. So second midwives can't meet every single requirement in there. It's just not possible, and that's because some of the responsibilities in there are primarily incumbent upon the primary midwife. So we have a very specific proviso written into the safety and quality guidelines that say as relevant to the practice of the second midwife. So that's up to the midwife and the second midwife to make a determination around what that looks like, and the board will absolutely take that into account in any sort of audit or if there was a notification or a complaint to be made about the practice of the second midwife. Naomi, did you want to, there was another part to that question. Are you able to just repeat that, sorry?
Yeah. As in the first question or my second question?
The second question.
I think it was just what does the second practitioner probably needs to be a bit more careful in making sure that they have that documentation signed off, whereas previously they may have taken it as the primary practitioner has got informed consent to acknowledge that there is no PII, whereas in this instance, they might need to have separate paperwork that they complete with the woman directly to make sure that they are meeting the safety and quality guidelines.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Naomi. So if the second midwife is still relying on the exemption within the provision of a home birth, they do need to make sure that the woman that they're caring for and that family are aware that they don't have that there's no insurance covering their practice, and that would be in the form of the national law actually specifies what form that should look like, and it is really important that that disclosure is made to the family, and that is signed and documented, just as evidence to say that the family is fully informed of this situation.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Siobhan. Now, next question, also about the midwife acting as the second. What does the NMBA see as the role of a midwife who is the second practitioner in intrapartum care?
Yeah. So the board doesn't provide clinical advice, and nor would we specify or stipulate, the role of the second midwife is X, Y, and Z, and, this is the role of the primary midwife. They're clinical decisions that are appropriate for the practitioners involved in that situation. So I couldn't provide advice from a board or a regulatory perspective, what's in and what's out, what's in scope, what's not in scope. Certainly I can answer that from a midwife, as I'm a midwife, from my perspective, but I don't know if that'd be quite, if my opinion's quite appropriate there.
I think I guess what I was more pointing to with that question is that both midwives are equally responsible and accountable for their care in that situation. Always. That one midwife doesn't have, I guess, more responsibility for the practice because they are the primary midwife, and the second midwife has, I guess, just as much responsibility for acting on and responding to emergencies if they should arise.
Definitely. And that goes before before the care being provided takes place. So midwives who are working as second practitioners or second midwives need to have good relationships with the primary midwife. They need to understand who the woman they're caring for is, what her risk factors are, her history. All of those things are really important. It is a shared responsibility. It's not just a matter of the second midwife stepping in, hanging around for a couple of hours, setting up the resus trolley or your resus area, and then stepping out again at the end, providing all goes to plan. The responsibilities are much broader than that, and you're absolutely right. The second midwife, just as much as the primary, is responsible and accountable for their practice, particularly within that context.
Lovely. Some of the things that we've talked about with the maternity officers who work for the ANMF is just having a discussion about ways of working together. What are your expectations of your roles? How do you provide care? What you might base your care on before you walk into a situation where you're working together, to make sure that you're both on the same page and that you have that relationship to be able to raise concerns.
Definitely.
I think you've already answered my next question, which was the plans for the NMBA to review the safety and quality guidelines. This week is very soon. I wasn't expecting that. I'll have to look out for it. I've got a question for Joel, which I think feeds into that idea of who's responsible for what and having clear expectations around care. And this question is also possibly off the back of the removal of collaborative arrangements over a year ago. But Joel, I understand you often get a lot of questions through MIGA regarding care plans. Would you like to provide some guidance on this?
Yeah, sure. No problems, Naomi. Previously our policy had to be quite prescriptive in the type and content of the care plans because it had to align with what was in the legislation at the time. So the whole idea behind care plans were to make services available in situations whereby a midwife couldn't get a collaborative agreement in place. So the care plan was the fallback position. With the collaboratives being removed, care plans are still a requirement as part of the policy, but they're nowhere near as prescriptive. And really, we're relying on the standards of practice that are the safety and quality guidelines and other standards of practice that are put in place by the NMBA, by the College of Midwives, that would dictate what is appropriate care. So really, the whole idea of the care plan was just documenting, as you would probably normally do in your normal course of practice, the different escalation pathways, making sure you had clear communication with the person that you were caring for. In this situation, this is how we're going to escalate care. In this situation, this is what we're going to have to do, so that everyone was on the same page. And that's essentially what we would require. And that really, I think over time, that emphasis may come off, because we may be looking at where the standards of practice are going to take primacy, and they already have. So when you look at medical indemnity, we don't have care plans determined in there. It's sort of implicit within the standards of practice and care that are put forward. And that's where that's where, from our point of view at MEGA, we would like to take this policy to make sure it does align with those other indemnity policies, to make sure that, privately practicing midwives who are highly professional and qualified at what they do are treated the same as the other insureds that we take care of, looking to those standards of care and looking to those practice areas to derive guidance as to what they can do and how they can do it. So that has been a significant change. And because the legislation has changed, it will continue to change a little bit. As you know, that the exemption is going to come off, things will change again in our policy wording, again, to move towards that directing what can and can't be done, more towards look to the standards of practice and what is appropriate and within guidelines for you and your expertise and your training, and what would be expected as best practice for you.
Yeah. And I think the word care plan has been used in different contexts as well. Like there's the 82155 MBS item number, which is for a care plan. That obviously the requirements for that are quite prescriptive and very independent of the definition of care plan under the MICA policy.
Yeah,
so
absolutely right, Naomi. Yeah,
it makes it.
Sorry, you're absolutely right. It was one of those things. I haven't been around in this space for that long. I'm not sure which came first, the insurance care plan or the Medicare benefit care plan. While there will be information in there that's going to cross over, they don't bear any relation to each other specifically. So it's essentially just documenting your care and what you propose to, how you propose to care for the people in your charge.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Joel. And I think, that important distinction that there are two different types of care plan out there in the midwifery space, and midwives need to be aware that they're two different things. Siobhan, do you have anything to add to documentation that would enable midwives to help meet that safety and quality guideline?
Yes. Documentation is so important. I can't stress this enough. If in doubt, write it down. It really, really helps. Memories fade significantly over time, and a contemporaneous record of what happened, who did what, how you escalated is so important for a team of people that you're never going to have met in 3 to 5 years' time, who might be trying to think really deeply about the care that was provided some time ago. So do write things down. Do keep those records, and different jurisdictions have different requirements on how long you need to keep those records. So I can't provide advice on that, but your insurer may be able to, and you can look online at the legislation. But document.
Yeah, we would also say that your documentation is basically your defence. So no notes, no defence. Good notes, good defence. Excellent notes, excellent defence. If you are talking about intrapartum care, now the claims can be brought for minors 18 years post the event plus, the age of majority, so 18 years plus 3 years beyond that. So you will have to keep your notes for at least that long to be able to ward that off. We would probably say, if you can at all, keep them indefinitely, because we do know that claims are brought well after what limitation periods may be flagged, and courts are quite sympathetic to plaintiffs to be able to allow those claims, especially in situations where they have clearly suffered some kind of a loss that will require some insurance. So I would say keep them as long as you possibly can.
Joel, I agree, and I'd just like to add to that. There are midwives, by and large, do the right thing. They practice safely, they follow the best available evidence, and they provide excellent care to women and families. The problem happens when people say, "Oh, well, I would have done that. That's part of my standard practice." Of course, it's however, if it wasn't documented, if it wasn't written down, and you didn't record the heart rate, at whatever interval it was at a particular point in time, the assumption is, well, did you at all? Did you actually? So what for a midwife is your, very basic or normal or instinctual practice for us, please write that down and do it contemporaneously. If you don't have time because you've got a head emerging or there's an emergency, take a moment before you leave a family's home to make those notes before you leave. Try not to, if you do it the next day, so be it, but where possible, do it as soon as possible while your recollection is at its sharpest.
Great point. Great. Thank you so much for that. Now we've got a few questions in the chat box. Pedro, it looks like some of them might be for you. So I'll go with the first question. What will happen for the second midwife role after the exemption period is over? If they are not able to be endorsed, can they still attend home births, and under what insurance?
Yeah, so I think Siobhan might have something to add in addition to whatever I say on this, but as far as the landscape is concerned, from the 31st of December, the exemption will no longer exist. And as far as I'm aware, there won't be any insurance product for registered only midwives who want to attend home births. So the answer, as far as I can see, is no at this stage, but I think there are some nuances that I would like to have a chat with Meager about, with Joel. And so if perhaps we could come back with a more substantive response in relation to that question. It's also, so Judy asked the question, and also Tegan asked a very similar question. So perhaps, if that's okay, we could come back with more. Absolutely. But Siobhan, if you have something else to add to that.
Yeah, I certainly can add a little bit. This is being actively considered by the Chief Nurse Midwifery Officer for the Commonwealth. This is being actively considered and reflected on by jurisdictional midwifery leads at the departments of health. I just wanted to provide some assurance that it's a very much known challenge that's currently being worked through. There's no immediate answer to this today, but it's being actively considered by the people that are decision makers. So I think that's really important to take with you. But certainly what I can share is that it's a bit of a tricky situation because you must be endorsed in order to be eligible for the insurance product to cover you for intrapartum care. Yes, you will need, if you're providing intrapartum care as the second midwife, you are going to need that full scope cover. But we also understand that there are many, many midwives who offer second practitioner services who don't hold the endorsement, and that's the only type of private practice they do. They only offer services as the second midwife. So I think Judy and Tegan, you're both correct in that this is a group of practitioners who are going to be thinking pretty deeply, well, do I need to go off and do my endorsement in order to be eligible for the insurance product? Because as of the 1st of January 2027, I must be insured. So it's tricky because there are second midwives who will likely say, but I don't want to prescribe. I don't prescribe. That is the endorsement itself is about the prescribing of scheduled medicines. So they may also not want to invest 3 months or 4 months of their time, and they've got other commitments, and they've got a regular role at a public hospital or in another capacity, and having an endorsement mightn't necessarily be relevant to that role. So It is something that the board's aware of. It's definitely something that state and territory health departments and also the Commonwealth Chief Nurse and Midwife, everyone's aware, and it's been considered.
And I think there's another question there, Siobhan, that I've just posted that actually talks about primary midwives relying on secondary midwives, and I think we could agree that that is also a well-known and discussed issue that's definitely not being ignored. I guess today we were trying to present what is known now and what is happening at the moment, because there was some misinformation out there, I think, about the PII and the changes. But definitely you're right that those discussions are happening, but there is no answer at the moment about how that's going to land in the end. And at the moment, the information we have is that as of 31st of December 2026, those second practitioners will need to be endorsed and have insurance with MIGA as it stands at the moment. And I think that then the question from Judy and from Tegan, Amy has got a question there, probably for you, Joel. What is the estimated cost of insurance, including intrapartum care for PPMs? And will there be other requirements for PPMs in order to be eligible for the insurance product on offer? Will there be mandated specifics around yearly professional development activities? I think that probably the second part is relevant to you, Siobhan.
Yeah. So when we talk about mandated specifics around required yearly professional development activities and emergency response and escalation training, that's already embedded into the safety and quality guidelines. So there's some really clear requirements that you need to be aware of and complying with, and that's to do with participating in a multidisciplinary maternity emergency response, education, and also your newborn resuscitation. So we've got some really specific guidance about what those sessions need to look like, how often you need to be completing those sessions. So I definitely go back into the safety and quality guidelines and reference those. And no, those will not change.
No, thanks, Siobhan. That's perfect. Yeah, look, from our point of view, as long as you're a registered midwife, a registered endorsed midwife, you'll be able to get the insurance. The pricing changes because we do have it actually works in tiers. So depending on the amount of income that you have, that's how the pricing changes. If you have an option A policy and you had an option A policy last year, the pricing hasn't changed. It'll be exactly the same if your income hasn't changed. If you go from an option B to an option A, there is a jump there. But to give you an idea, for a midwife who is earning more than $90,000 a year, the option A insurance is $7,500. For a midwife who is earning less than $25,000 a year, the option A insurance is $2,400. And there's some gradations in there. But if you jump on our website, that is there on our midwifery page. You can go in there and check for yourself.
Thanks, Joel. That's great that you can give us some estimates and how it works. There's another question in there about PII. Do I need to purchase PII as a PPM working in homes only within the postnatal period? I'm an endorsed midwife.
Yes. If you are doing any kind of, as Siobhan answered earlier, if you're doing any kind of privately practicing midwifery, you do have to have insurance. You wouldn't necessarily have to have option A if you're not doing any intrapartum care. If you're just doing postnatal care, you can do that, and it is a little bit more. It is a little bit cheaper because you're not taking on that bigger risk of the intrapartum period. Siobhan, did you want to add anything to that?
No, just to say that insurance having insurance is something that you have to have no matter where you are or what you're doing. Holding insurance is critical and a regulatory requirement, whether you're in a hospital, practicing at home for a big tertiary hospital. The difference is if you are an employee of a health service, you will be insured by the policies of that health service. Most midwives and lots of practitioners don't even realise that they are insured by virtue of their employee status. Gets a little bit more complicated if you're a contractor, but you are always required to have PII for all aspects of your practice, just except for that little intrapartum care period up until the 31st of December next year.
And that's a good point, Siobhan. So if you are working part-time in a hospital, you will be indemnified for the work you do in that hospital. If you're doing private midwifery work outside of that, you'll have to have a privately practicing midwife insurance policy to make sure you are covered for everything. And then your income in that situation doesn't take into consideration that income you derive from your public work. So if you say you're earning $90,000 working in a public hospital, we don't count that towards your income as a privately practicing midwife. It's only that income derived through your private practice that goes into calculating your premium for that.
And I might just jump in there and say it's worth having a look at the definition of a privately practicing midwife in the safety and quality guidelines for privately practicing midwives, because it does quite clearly articulate what constitutes private practice, and the definition is quite broad, so it is worth having a look at that definition and really considering if you are a midwife in private practice, and particularly I think for dual registered nurses and midwives to consider that they may be providing a service that nurses also provide in the postnatal period, but as they are a midwife, they need to check that they've got the appropriate PII to cover that practice. It's very clear in the safety and quality guidelines for privately practicing midwives. Just going to check if there are any more questions. There is a question about the ANMF PII insurance compared to the MIGA insurance. This one actually came up in a Facebook post about today's webinar. I guess I can answer that. The ANMF PII insurance is branch specific. So some of the branches have extended their insurance product to include midwives providing antenatal and postnatal care. Not all branches have done that, as they don't have the same underwriter for their insurance. So you'll need to discuss with your branch what is available for you as a midwife by contacting your branch, and then they may put you in touch with the branch insurer. I hope that answers that question, Judy. And there was some more there. A question for
Naomi, if I just add on to your answer there, we have fielded a few questions from people wanting to take up that insurance. We can't really comment on the inclusions and exclusions of other providers' policies. So you will have to, and I know it's not a great answer, but you'll have to make sure that it does cover you for everything that you're doing. It very likely will, but we can't give you advice to say what another insurer's policy will cover, because we don't want to be in the situation where you are left with a gap.
Yeah, so it is important to go back to the insurer to check what their policy is.
If you do have questions and you do contact us, we'll help you with the questions you do need to ask of that insurer.
Beautiful. There's another question from Tegan. I believe Judy and I might both be from WA. In regards to getting an appropriate second midwife for a planned home birth, especially in regional WA, there are many that rely on seconds that aren't endorsed to fill the gap. I think, Tegan, this is also very much on the radar of the policy and decision makers, that particularly in areas where there may not be many endorsed midwives, or there are a lower number of options for midwifery care, that puts particular stress, I guess, on the second practitioner if the exemption is removed, and they need to become endorsed. So I think that is, and hopefully we have answered it, that there's not an answer for that yet. It is in discussions at the moment. The exemption is set to end on the 31st of December next year, and that exemption period is designed to give people an opportunity to look at how their business works and to make the appropriate changes to be able to meet those requirements should they remain at the end of the year. Is that correct, Pedro and Siobhan?
Yeah, that's right.
Beautiful. And then I think we might have answered. Oh, and another question for you, Siobhan. I wondered if there was discussion, yourself and ARPA colleagues, about reducing the midwifery hours required to become endorsed.
Yes, great question. So the endorsement for scheduled medicines for midwives is currently under review. When we review any piece of regulation, we go out for a period of preliminary consultation, which is where we test the proposal with stakeholders, and then we go out, once we receive feedback during that phase, and we implement and uplift the proposal, and then we go out for a period of public consultation, which is where we seek midwives' opinions and anyone who wishes to comment, really. The endorsement, we've concluded the preliminary consultation phase, and we're gearing up to go out to public consultation. And I can confirm that we are considering the hours. At the moment, there are 5,000 hours required within a 6-year period from the point of when you put your application into the board. The 5,000 hours is under review. I can't share what the proposal from the board is, so the proposal of how we'd like to change that. But I would really encourage you to comment and have your say as part of the public consultation when those documents come to you. Email, the NBA newsletter, emails, they're the usual channels. If you have social media with the board or APRA, we often publicise it through those sort of channels too. So the answer is yes, they're actively being considered.
Thanks, Siobhan. And then there's just one last question, which is I'm not quite sure what the first part of the question refers to, and it's a little bit of a curly question. So it says we need to consent for all those things, though. I'm not sure what that refers to, but it says, what do we do if the woman refuses? And I know that declining recommended care is like a bit of a tough topic. I think we don't really have a great answer about how to manage women who decline recommended care. Joel or Siobhan, how would you like to respond to that question?
Yeah, it's a tough one. The College of Midwives, and I can't remember what, it's an attachment to their consultation referral guidelines that actually does deal with this a little bit. Now, in the situation where you have got all that documentation in place where a woman doesn't want to wants to decline recommended care and wants to go on another pathway, you can do that, and we'll support you where you have gone through that process appropriately. You won't be covered to be able to provide. So the woman who has declined care in a home birth situation, they probably won't be able to access compensation for a claim, and you won't be covered for compensation from a claim because of the paperwork that you'll have to fill out prior. Essentially tries to indemnify you by the patient to say, oh, I'm not going to make a claim for the issues that arise from my decisions here. Where that happens in advance, look, it is easier. When it happens sort of on the day when someone's in active labour, whether those documents and things will hold up is another question altogether. And then whether the care is so far a departure from what will be expected by the standards of practice as set by, and Siobhan can jump in here in a moment, as set by the board or by the College of Midwives or any other governing body, that would be another question as well. So what we would say is if it does depart from, if a woman does want to depart from recommended care and it places you in a situation where you're not going to be comfortable with that, we would highly recommend that you have a conversation with them about whether you can continue to care, because I think in some respects it places you in a very unenviable position. I feel sometimes it can be really unfair on a midwife, because if someone declines care in a hospital, it's quite easy to pass that care over to someone else or that patient to be made comfortable and other things to be done. However, if you're in, say, an out-of-hospital care situation, you might be the only health professional for a very long, very large distances and very long, very significant amount of time. So I think it is a very difficult thing for a midwife, and I think we need to probably do a little bit better around that, policy-wise and everything, to support you guys in what you're doing to make it much clearer and easier. There's no good answer here. Siobhan, did you want to add to my ramblings?
No, not ramblings at all. It is really tricky. I would just encourage private midwives to be thinking closely about their scope of practice. So if a woman is declining care outside of, whatever the situation is, it's really important for the midwife to reflect on their own scope of practice. Do you have, for example, twins or breech? Is that within your scope? For some midwives, it might be. They might have had training, they might have had experience, they might have been able to build knowledge in those particular areas. So I would strongly encourage you to reflect on, do you feel safe and confident to continue to provide care for this person? Has the woman been appropriately counselled about the risks and the benefits? Have the conversation with your insurer. Have the conversation with your professional representative body. That might be the ANMF. You might want to have the conversation with the with the ACM. Think about your consultation and referral pathways, and document.
I think there are a lot of ifs and a lot of individual aspects of that question that really are very situational, that it's about the person, it's the midwife and the presentation that's in front of you, and all of the circumstances that surround that person. And I think that Joel is right. We've got work to do in that space for women who decline care, recommended care, I should say. And there's no hard and fast rule, which I think makes it hard, because we would like a line in the sand of this is okay and this is not okay. But I think when it comes to this aspect of practice, it's very hard to get that black and white answer. I'll just check if there are any other questions. I don't think so. Lovely. I would just like to finish by thanking our panelists for offering their time today and sharing with us their knowledge and expertise in this area. I hope that everyone's enjoyed the information that we've shared today and has found it useful for their practice. Any further questions on this topic can be emailed to the ANMF Federal email, and it's just on the screen there, anmffederal@anmf.org.au. And we hope to have this webinar posted in the coming days on the website for review. Again, thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to sharing more information with you on another occasion.
Naomi, can I just clarify one thing? I've just got a little yes, I've got a little Teams note from someone in my team who said to me, the review of the safety and quality guidelines is not going out this week. It is the preliminary consultation which is going out this week. So the public consultation on that document will be next year, early next year. It's just the consultation component to key stakeholders. So just to clarify that.
Thanks for clarifying, Siobhan. That's a great pickup right as we're finishing. Lovely. Thank you very much to everyone for coming along and hearing about PII changes for midwives.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.